Welcome to the EdGate Podcast. Today we're here to talk about how edtech companies can check all the right boxes to win K-12 contracts. And with me is Maria Slabaugh from MMS Education. And her background is in research, and I'll let her give a summary, but we're excited to talk a little bit about how research can help edtech companies to check those boxes. Maria.
Great. Thank you so much, Rich. I'm very excited to be joining you today. So MMS is an agency that works with nonprofit and for-profit companies, and we're focused solely on the K through 12 education market. We've been providing a range of services, data, marketing, and research for more than 40 years. And that's a huge asset in terms of our wealth of knowledge and experience that we bring to the table to tackle hard problems and surface big opportunities. So personally, as you mentioned, I head up our research division. I've been with MMS for many years. Prior to that, I was working in a marketing and strategy role for many across many industries. So I bring all of that experience to the table as well. And so in our research division, we're able to provide a range of quant and qual research services and that important layer of strategic consulting on top of it to make sure outcomes are actionable and align with those strategic goals. So I know we'll dive into a little bit more about some specifics about what MMS does, but yeah, that's a quick introduction to myself.
Well, terrific. Thank you for giving us some background. And there's clearly some important concepts there that especially ed tech companies, and today we're kind of separating them a little bit from publishers, because publishers traditionally have a better sense of that marketplace. They've been there for a long time. They have the people on board, and if they don't have the people on board, they have the relationships. But newer ed tech companies coming into this market really sometimes, and I've been there, having started my own ed tech company back over 10 years ago now, you're a little bright-eyed about what you see out there, and you think you're going to be able to attack a market, but often there's this chasm that you don't realize, or these challenges that you don't realize exist, that prevent you from winning those contracts, even if your product is fantastic. And so I think we want to try to articulate what some of those things are, so the viewers can get a better sense of what they might need to tackle within their strategies. In doing that, we want to we're going to touch on a little bit of the quant and qual. I can give a little bit of background about EdGate. I do want to mention too to the audience that we're going to be having a podcast on this topic with a group of panelists, including Maria, including myself, on April 4th. I'll give more information on the back end of this interview so that you can join that more detailed conversation. But to jump into today's conversation, I wanted to start off with a question about qualitative research and how can that impact edtech companies looking to gain traction, Maria?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And qualitative research can take, of course, many forms, and figuring out what is the right research and what is most impactful for whatever the challenge or opportunity is really key to making sure that you're making the best use of your time and resources. I've worked for a lot of startups as well, and I know that it's always a push and pull around speed to market and getting something out there and seeing what the market reaction is against that, taking that time to really think through and have informed decisions. So it's probably not surprising for me to say this, but to me, good research is essential in the K through 12 education space. The market is changing rapidly. We hear that all the time, but it feels very much that right now in this moment, those uncertainties and changes are really significant. There's a lot going on with buyers and end users. They have a lot of competing pressures. And as you said, even if a product is amazing, the market might not be ready to receive it or receptive in the ways that you might think that it is. So we work with a lot of ed tech companies trying to figure out that balance between go with your gut to keep things moving forward versus taking, again, that time for that research-informed decisions. So a lot of times when we look at qualitative research, what we're really trying to do is separate that internal opinions and internal experiences are so valuable from what the market and the participants are saying. So we do things like interviews with experts who have a view of the entire marketplace and can give you a broad perspective, all the way down to the actual end users of products, like the people that you are trying to convince that will be using your product. And of course, those important decision makers in between. And we specialize in doing that combination qualitative, which I think is so valuable, of those opinions, and then rolling it up into trends and insights so that you're not just taking, this interview said this and this one said that. Collectively, what do those different inputs tell you about where the market is going and what those buyers want? And then a lot of times we're able to conduct qualitative research that is a bit in between. Quantitative is great because it gives you the numbers that you feel confident. And sometimes qualitative gets the short end of the stick to say, well, it's just, a few interviews or whatever it may be. I think the magic is combining enough qualitative that's done right so that you feel the confidence, but you also have that deep insight about what people are actually saying about your opportunity and your product. So, I guess a real quick example, we worked with a company recently. They were trying to enter the US market with an edtech product. They had a great concept, they still do, a great concept, but they didn't really even know how to position themselves or how potential buyers or end users might react. And so we were able to design some custom questions and target the right people and go deeply into understanding those important questions. And that ended up leading to quantitative insights rather. It doesn't always have to, but it led to quantitative insights that were more on the mark to get to the important information that they were looking for.
And I think that's fantastic. And it brings me back a little bit. I want to give you an example and see, because I think this would be helpful for listeners. Back when, prior to starting Career Path, we worked with Valparaiso University, and they had asked us to do some work with their career center. They had lack of engagement. So we went in there and we tried to figure out why they had a lack of engagement. So we did some in-depth interviews with the students and with the professors and the people in the career center. So that was super helpful. And then there was a lack of quantitative data. I'd say there's some top line numbers like, okay, well, here's the number of students coming in, and so we had a little bit, but not a ton. But anyway, that the metric at the end of the day, when we created a program, we created the predecessor of Career Path. It was a little mobile platform that helped to engage students, and we used some measure within the application itself to compare students to their cohort, so they knew if 87% of their cohort had completed a milestone, then they needed to get on their horse and get it done. But when we rolled that forward and we started Career Path, and we were working with Dartmouth College, which was our first client, they asked us to kind of recreate that for them. We really went on that anecdotal information, or that what we had learned from Valparaiso. Hey, okay, here's how successful it was, and now we've had another school ask us. We were all excited, and little pie-eyed about, okay, well, this is a market that's ripe for opportunity. At that point in time, what would you have recommended to us to do to change the trajectory or to change the approach to the marketplace?
Yeah, that's I think a great example. And when we talk to companies like that who have these great ideas, and they understandably think about the opportunity from their own lens and their perspective of here's what we bring to the market, but the market has all sorts of stuff going on that's competing for time and resources and funding. And so a lot of times when we hear someone coming and saying, I've got this idea, what do we think about it? We could go to a survey and you would say to people, rate on a scale of 1 to 5 what you think about this, 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 and this. And like, do you like that, that, and that? And a lot of times you end up getting what you are looking for because you're asking very narrow questions. With qualitative, what we really do is kind of understand, maybe you ask without asking. So you find a way to say, what are your pain points? What are those opportunities? What are you seeing in the competitive landscape? What do you like about something? Where does something come up short? And then what you look to do is align what you know about a product that you want to bring to market, or it was already out there being piloted. You connect those dots and say, here's the sweet spot. Here's the thing that's going to not only make people happy, but have a bigger opportunity for you because it's going to solve a problem. And so when you come into it from here's my product, let's test that product, versus what's going on with that actual decision maker, their headaches, what's going on with the end user, their needs and what they're looking for. When you find that sweet spot, often qualitative is essential to unearth the things that you maybe hadn't even considered. They might come up with an idea that you hadn't even thought of, but it's perfectly aligned with your product. So I think it's an example of using qualitative to get at the heart of things that are bigger than just a product questionnaire.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend, having been in the seat of an entrepreneur, as you're going through fundraising, and one of the keys that entrepreneurs look at is the MVP. Here's the starting point. We want to gather as much feedback as possible. We want to understand how this product addresses a market need. We want to tweak it before we get to a point where we can really go for gathering some paying customers. So there's a couple different phases there, and if you're fundraising, if you're getting into a seed fundraising round, I would highly recommend bringing in someone like Maria to get the qualitative research done, because it makes a huge difference. You may understand a lot of anecdotal information about the marketplace at that time, but having the in-depth knowledge and the qualitative the research makes a difference. So that there's a little plug and recommendation. But for a company that's more advanced, the other advantage to Maria, it seems like the players in the marketplace because you specialize in education. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I may say I want to get into K-12 and I start to understand it, but you're going to have a much broader scope and understanding of the players in the industry than I would as someone just trying to come into the market, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking the same thing as you were describing that MVP process. We worked with companies before who are either looking to enter the market as a brand new company or with a new product line or whatever it might be. And we've worked with those movers and shakers in this space. There are definitely districts, names that we all know. I'm not going to name drop right now, but names we know of. When a district makes a move for a product, everyone else pays attention. And we've gone out and done qualitative research where we present that MVP. It could be little sketches, it could be journeys, it could be whatever it is to bring the idea to life and get that input and reaction. And these are people who also understand the market beyond their own district. They're just wonderful sources of information. And when you gather that up against, again, identifying those pain points and then also doing some market sizing, if it's SEL or whatever the type of product is, there's definitely market sizing data that you can add to the picture to say, these big influencers out there, they like it. The market sizing looks interesting. If you were to go after this piece of it, then you could expect to build on some success. And then also the importance of piloting. So can you get someone to say yes to a pilot? Can you get out there and gather that data also by knowing who to go to and how to present an opportunity and get them to give you that additional feedback and hopefully thumbs up or at least very valuable feedback about the direction you're taking.
So that's an interesting point, because my again anecdotal theory is that there's very few early adopters in education. It's mostly a followers market, and that's not a criticism. It's just the fact that educators in general are extremely busy, and they leverage the learnings of other people in order to assess and to adopt new technologies for themselves. And so the experience I had at Dartmouth was we had an entrepreneurial director of the Career Center who said, all right, we want to do something new. That doesn't, in my experience, that doesn't really exist in education too much. So how would you frame that up for somebody who has an MVP or maybe a little bit beyond, as they're looking for those early adopters compared to more of a mainstream? How do you see that market from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the market with big quotes around it. The market is huge and complex, and what is it really? And so it depends what product it is. Let's say, for example, we have been working with a lot of companies right now that want to bring in products that align with science of reading. And that's just such a hot topic, but you really need to know the market down to the state and sometimes district level, because you've got legislation happening. So that impacts where you're most likely to find success. You've got districts that have local control versus top-down control of the products and what they bring into their districts. Having that knowledge about what's going on in different states, identifying where you're most likely to find interest in success, looking at the state level funding. Are they funding family engagement products? Are they funding ELL products? So we take a look when we have someone come to us and say, where do we think you're going to find most success? And then once we say, let's say here's the top 5 states where we think your product's going to have the funding, have the need, have the mandates. And then we say, well, then who do we know? And who can we start reaching out to get feedback on more on that local level? And then we say, let's whittle it down. And then we also can help companies, because I work in the research department, we have plenty of other people at MMS. We have the ability to then start to broker those conversations about what might a pilot look like, or just feedback. Like if you were to go out to market, what might some parameters be for pricing? Like whatever those big questions are, we kind of look at it from that perspective of where are you most likely to have success? Who do we know? What do we need to ask? And then it helps kind of, smooth that process as you try to move forward.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and that's where oftentimes MMS and EdGate kind of come together, because that's where companies who are trying to approach a market, they need to adopt the standards and they need to align to the standards, and EdGate has similar relationships, so we often kind of cross paths with MMS at that point in time. As these are the things that you have to do to gain access to a market. These are the check boxes that we talked about, right? That's part of the topic here. From your experience, what are some of the key practices that are often overlooked by software creators that inhibit their chances for adoption? It's kind of the other end of this, right? Is what are you going to do to get adopted? What are the inhibitors?
Yeah, I mean, these are things that I think that any business, especially one that's growing and is innovating, goes through, which is speed to market, wanting to move forward, reacting to all the pressures out there, like, oh, the ESSER funding's ending, I need to hurry up and do this thing, or not maybe carefully thinking through opportunity costs. Like any business, if you decide to do this versus that, there's a cost, there's a trade-off. What are they? And I think having an honest conversation or honest assessment of what your strengths and weaknesses are, where you actually fit in the competitive marketplace, those things are, they feel big to tackle. And I think that's why MMS plays such an important role, to break it down and make it so that you can figure those things out. But I think number one is, not maybe taking an honest assessment about your own product and company and opportunity, and the speed versus thoughtfulness, having that out of balance is something that I think is understandable. A lot of companies are, and why would they be, are not staffed to be able to tackle and understand those questions internally. And so having a good partner, having someone that can help with that actionable insight and help you inform how to make the best decision around what opportunity to pursue. So I think that kind of speed and rush against thoughtfulness, finding the right balance is definitely important for a company to be successful.
Often in entrepreneurial circles and some of the work that I've done, we talk about a sharp blade cuts deeper than a hammer, and what that talks to is often entrepreneurs want to, or our younger companies, they want to expand market quickly and they want to get as broad as they can, and the challenge with that is you stretch your resources very thin, it costs money, and it leaves a lot of failure points. Whereas if you pick a sweet spot and really focus in on that and sharpen that up, you're gonna be able to get much further along and break open a market, and then you have chances to expand. How do you use the research and the services that MMS would provide in order to sharpen that blade and to get as deep of a cut as you can?
Yeah, I think the sort of life cycle of research, whenever you're doing, market plan, go to market, whatever it is you're doing, whatever stage you're in, is sort of the upfront work, which is much like I was just describing, understanding the market, the personas, like all of that. So you make your best effort to put together a plan that's informed and thoughtful. Then the next step really is the gathering data along the way. What's that feedback loop look like? Are you doing qualitative and quantitative to get that feedback from end users or whoever's testing out your product or whatever's going on with the market? How are you tracking successes and failures that you're learning, and that you're doing that sort of fast fail mentality of learn, adapt, come back out of it again? And then when you hit the right moment in that life cycle, how are you feeding information back into your product team, your sales team, your marketing team, so that you're saying, well, this is what resonated, this is where we're standing out, how do we hone our sales strategy, and how is that also being informed by research? So I think skipping any of those steps is tough, because you're not learning, it's not a sharp blade, or you're not making enough cuts to really understand what's going on and how, and to be responsive to that process and learn along the way. So I think each step in that process has a research component, and it shouldn't be daunting. When you work with someone like MMS or EdGate, it's really like that consultative approach to say, one size does not fit all. How can we take our expertise on how you do each of those things and adapt it to where you are and where you're trying to go?
I would also provide a little bit of a warning to put down the hammer warning, because one of the things that we're seeing is a rapid change of standards in a ton of different states, literally year over year changes that are affecting the marketplace greatly. So if you don't have an understanding of that particular state, make sure you're fully prepared to change, to fix any gaps that exist within your content, because I guarantee, if you're going into a state, most likely their standards have changed at many different levels or grade levels. So it's hard to keep up. And, even frankly, for a company like EdGate, which specializes in standards and doing these correlation services, it's a Herculean task. We have web watchers and people out there like gathering information all the time and trying to keep us as fresh as possible, and then adding the metadata to those to the standards to make them as readable as possible and useful. But it's challenging. So I think having that qualitative, having the quantitative understanding, and then having the right tools in place, and getting your blade sharp, as we say, is really critical today.
Yeah. I mean, all the research that we've done, no surprise. Well, actually, I was going to say no surprise, but maybe it might be. Standards alignment increasingly is the cost of doing business, and when you don't know where you stand on alignment with standards, you're setting yourself up for a lot of challenges, because you can't walk into a district and offer a product without expecting one of the first questions to be, how do you align with state standards? And if you don't know how to answer that, or if you don't really understand the range of ways to answer that, it's going to be a challenge. So I was just talking to a district in Texas yesterday, and they're one of those states that has seen so much change. And there's a lot of rigidity around the standards when you look at it from maybe the top down. So you need to understand, with Texas, for example, where do we fit? Do we align with 80% of the standards? And how do they actually, what does that mean in Texas? Where's the room to maneuver around standards? And when I was speaking to this educator yesterday, I got the real story about, this is what we hear and you need to know that, but actually in my district, here's the room to play around with, and here's a supplemental versus a core product, and what does that mean? And so I think also the high level information about standards is critical. It's guiding a lot of purchase decisions. And then in other states, you might find it's important to know, but there's more flexibility. If you don't know which state you're talking to and what the situation is, you're going to have maybe a lot of frustrated salespeople who are coming back to you and saying, I wasn't prepared for this, and you need to answer how you can help.
Yeah. And matter of fact, I know when we do work with ed tech companies, usually the leader in those efforts is a salesperson, as compared to the publishers, it's someone who has been in education, who
Mhm.
understands those, has advanced degree and really understands the need for standards and has a specialty. So I think there's
Mhm.
the personas are different, right?
Mhm.
And we need to approach them, for ourselves a little bit differently, and they, in turn, need to approach the marketplace in a thoughtful way.
Mhm.
Um, so that leads me into kind of what's next. We have our budget
Mhm.
cycle coming up, 2024-25. What are you seeing in that marketplace, and what are some insights you could share that might help um, our audience?
Yes, that is what is on everyone's mind. As unbelievably, we're entering another end of school year approach as we move into April and May. So, as we look ahead to 2025, I guess if I had to pick maybe three things to focus on, it's hard to pick, but one of them is definitely that's on my mind is the ESSER funding cliff. So, of course, that's the need to have request extensions and to develop district plans and get things approved. That's coming at the end of September. And so everything's related to the COVID recovery efforts. And so right now, a lot of districts are trying to figure out which products are going to make the cut after that happens. So are you going to be an essential product? Are you on the chopping block? What's retention looking like? Where's there opportunities for new sales, new ed tech products? What's going on? So I think looking beyond a bit of that funding cliff drama, which is definitely legitimate, but it's taking up a lot of air and energy, and understanding what that really means for states, for example. Some states are supplementing funding to try to close that gap. Understanding what's really going on is super important, and trying to cut through the noise and make sure that you're keeping customers, if you're in there, and not missing the boat on when they make those cuts. The other thing that's going on, everybody's talking about the sciences movement. So I
Yeah.
think aligning to evidence-based standards and having data-driven solutions is really important. A lot of the pandemic learning loss backlash has led to a lot of districts wanting that evidence. So if you're proving your worth and you're showing student achievement and providing the right kinds of evidence and efficacy around your products is super important. It does vary state by state and sometimes, again, district by district. But when you talk about standards, when you talk about assessments, when you talk about all those things that are evidence-based, it really is important to be knowing what matters to your decision makers and making sure your product aligns with that. And then I guess we couldn't talk about K through 12 education if we didn't talk about AI. So that is definitely on the top of everyone's minds. It is everywhere. You cannot read an article about education without thinking about AI. So I think especially with ed tech products, what is the noise, signal from the noise, the myth from reality? Where can you really make sure you're checking boxes if that's necessary and adding value where it's important with AI? And that's a great example of research can really say, what are the boundaries of AI? What are the expectations? What are the pain points versus the fear factor? And how do you balance AI so that you get people's attention without AI that scares buyers away? So I think that separating that myth from reality, I'm really interested to see how that evolves in the coming school year and how that might affect decision makers and buyers.
I think it's important to have the mindset that you don't talk about the feature, you talk about the benefit. It's easy to say AI and everybody like their ears perk up and either they cringe or they're like, oh,
Or they lean
there's
in.
something
Yeah.
there. Okay, what could it be? But
Mhm.
it's really about the end benefit of
Correct.
what it's going to provide to the educator, to the district. So, when you are approaching a market, don't lead with AI. Lead with the benefit, because that's what's going to get them, really excited about what you're doing. And then if it's powered by AI, that's great. They understand that, maybe it has some speed or there's some advantages to it. So that's just kind of
Mhm.
my 2 cents on it.
Yeah.
From a marketing perspective, how to approach um, to win those contracts, because the funding is one piece, but having all the right talking points and having it, the ability to back it up, and like you say with the research component, you're able to really go in there as fully prepared as possible to win that contract, because you'll have the information on what they're looking for and what's going to resonate, what's winning and what's not winning within their space.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other examples of kind of what you see as great opportunities or winning strategies that you want to share?
Yeah, I think it does go back to, as you were just mentioning, those pain points. They are many. The pain points that are out there in education right now are really opportunities for solves. And I think a lot of times companies are coming in saying, here's my solution, like you were just saying, now find a problem that it addresses. And that is not a great approach, but it's understandable. When you really take the kind of the generalizations that are out there in education, you toss them aside and you say, let me actually dig deep and understand what's going on. It's complicated in a way, but we try to make it simple. So really boiling down those personas, connecting your products to meet those needs is really the way for success. And I think when you combine the qualitative research, the quantitative research, and also the important internal knowledge, that's another thing that we do. We don't discard the people working in a company who have, the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into designing products. That's valuable also. We hold internal focus groups with stakeholders to pull that information out. But I would say the one thing that I see all too often is the actual voice of, whether it's sometimes it's students, youth voice, like what do they think about your product? It's the voice of the educator, it's the voice of the administrator. What are they really feeling and how can you address that? And that's the thing that we focus on, is no generalizations. Whether it's the company we work with, we customize things to understand what their opportunities and needs are, and then connect it to the marketplace for what they're really looking for. So voice of the customer is so important, aligning it to pain points, not just features. We have to focus on those benefits.
And it was interesting what you just said about internal audience, understanding the people on your team. There may be some insights there that, you as the head of sales, or you as the CEO, or someone in charge may not understand. And so, digging into that a little bit is really interesting. I never really considered that, Maria, but I think, that was a great.
It's usually valuable. Yeah,
insight.
when we start engagements, we will talk to those heads of sales and marketing and product and the founder and whoever it is. And we also connect the dots, because if a company fundamentally doesn't have either the skills or interest or mandate or whatever it is to pursue a certain thing, it's better to be self-reflective and know that, and then focus on those strengths and focus on the combined opportunities. So, it might be nice to go chase AI, but if at your heart you're not really an AI business and it's not what you're really about, then don't go there. Like, you don't need to. And so we sometimes, the stakeholder interviews are so important, because we're that third party. We have the expertise, like you mentioned, the market. We know how to ask certain questions that maybe haven't gotten teased out in the product development process or the planning or whatever it may be. So I think that's a step. You're asking earlier about missteps or missed opportunities. I think that's a huge one, is that self-reflection, and we enjoy doing that with the companies we work with.
It's funny, the upcoming ASU GSV conference, which is in San Diego. A lot of people will attend that conference. It's they're having a specific show just for AI, and there's like over 1,000 vendors signed up already. It's crazy, but everybody wants in that game. And I look back and what EdGate has done, and I think we've been using AI components for 5 or 6 years, and it just never talked about it because it never was a topic. It didn't matter. It was just a technology component or something that you did to speed some results that we wanted to see from our taxonomy, and being able to do some alignments in the background quicker. And all of a sudden, we have to kind of turn on the switch and say, put the neon light up and say, we have AI here. So it's almost like a cost of entry these days. But is it that important? And I think that's what you help to reveal.
Absolutely. So when you talk to, let's say, an administrator or a chief technology officer, whoever it is, they're going to have a very different view on AI than an educator is. And I think it's all too tempting to say, oh, educators are technology resistant and they don't want to be taken out of the equation and they don't want their own abilities to be, to have AI take over whatever those things are. That's easy to say, but the reality is much different. At the end of the day, they're looking to serve students, meet them where they are, customize whatever they're doing to reach students. And AI can, of course, help with that in the right form. But what does that really mean? And what's the line between educator and AI? What are they looking to have offloaded? What do they want to retain? And you don't know that until you talk to them. You don't know what it means to aid with grading or whatever your tool does. So understanding that pain point, as we've been talking about all along, is essential because the opportunity is there. But if you miss the mark by going a little this way or a little that way or a little, and you keep yourself out of the market, it's something that you could have known, that could have been research informed, and it can not only create those opportunities, but avoid some of those barriers and missteps.
Okay. Fantastic. From your perspective, because we're talking about checking all the right boxes, and and we talked a lot about how quantitative research can be utilized for the client side. We talked about how it could be used internally to get, or quantitative, or I guess there could be qualitative too, right? It can be both on internal teams and how important that is. Do you feel that newer ed tech companies are aware of the space and the need to do things like alignments and understand standards? Or do you think there's a misperception or lack of understanding about some of those best practices?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. One I would say is I think generally there is perhaps not an appreciation of how important they are, standards are, because it has evolved so quickly. There's a lot to keep track of, and there's only so much an individual company, especially a startup, can keep track of. So I think it's moving rapidly. And the other thing is it's really complex and you need support. It's not something that a company could just figure out on their own. So I think it's understandable. It's rapidly changing. It's complex, and it might be easy to say, well, our product is just doing this one thing. I don't need to worry about that. We're not a core whatever. We can just slip in. And I think that's increasingly not the case. There's much more rigor around what is being utilized in classrooms and by districts. So it's ever evolving, rapidly changing. It's important to keep an eye on that because it will be a quick no. These RFPs that are being pumped out by school districts these days, the rigor behind what they're asking for, it used to be if it was a smaller product or smaller purchase, it didn't matter, but we're seeing the rigor around that increase tremendously. And if you're not able to answer those questions and get through their process, and who knows, maybe they're using AI to evaluate RFPs these days, it's entirely possible, you might not make the cut and you might not check those boxes, and it's something you perhaps could have done and would regret versus getting out ahead of it with that confidence.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. Similar to a resume process, when you're applying for jobs, a lot of the candidates are just smoked right out by the AI engine, and they could be a perfectly good candidate, but there's some piece missing. And similarly, if even if it is reviewed by a human, if you're missing a component, certainly an AI engine will just, smoke it out. But if a human sees that there's fields missing or something that's short, you're going to quickly get swiped away because there's too much competition within the space.
And you might not get the feedback either. Some districts are good about giving feedback. Like, here's where you were missing. If you have a good relationship, you might hear, oh, here's this, and resubmit, but you might not. And so I think that not knowing, that information, lack of information could be really daunting. Whereas again, if you go in knowing things like standards are you must have, and it's got to check that box, you'll be much more confident and successful with getting through that process.
I would imagine a company like MMS too has familiarity with what's coming up in terms of different RFPs too, right?
Yeah, the adoption cycles that are going on, the new standards that are coming out. it is something that requires that eye on what's going on in the market now, but also that view to the future. And like, especially I mentioned science of reading earlier, there's all this legislation happening. Well, what does that really mean? What's the timeline? When do these things happen? And when do you need to be prepared? It could be now, it could be 3 years from now, and you need to know it so that you focus on the things that you've got to address now. But that eye towards the future is really important so that you don't find yourself 3 years down the road, oops, we should have invested in this and focused on that, and we didn't, and now we're out.
Boy, that's a real competitive advantage to have that insider knowledge, someone on your team that can bring about that industry expertise that's invaluable. I know that EdGate has been around for a long time, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention, some of the tools that we're using today, one of which is, and you and I have spoken about, is EdGate. And we just launched a new feature within EdGate, and I guess for the audience's sake, EdGate is an alignment tool. That's where it started off, is saying, you can have this set of content that you upload, you can have a specific set of standards, and you can do the alignment, and the tool will manage that process. But we built a new feature so that people can view standards right in line within the tool, which is really helpful. They can drill down and see the benchmarks and the sub benchmarks and everything that goes into the standards, and still manage their content. But one of the biggest features is the gap analysis. So if you're saying I have fourth grade math and I have it for Texas, but now I'm trying to go out for the other 49 states, or 51 if I include Puerto Rico and BC as kind of quasi states in this particular example. I can start to understand how many states directly align, how many, and then it'll show me those gaps along the way, and they'll get larger and larger over time with some of the states, and then I could fill those gaps with new content that's required, right? So that's a pretty specific process. Quantitative research is much the same, right? It's you're creating that measure, and you're kind of in some ways showing the gap within the space, so that the edtech company can fill that gap in order to get the contract, or at least be a viable candidate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple things I would comment on. I think it's the gap analysis is so important. Also understanding the requirements of the market. Like, for example, I keep picking on Texas because I think it's so interesting the way that they've approached things. I was talking to a different administrator, decision maker last week, and she was telling me how a product that only covered K through 2, loved the product, wonderful, teachers thrilled with it. They had to get rid of it because the new standards required it to cover K through 3, and they hadn't adjusted and adapted accordingly. Similarly with standards, we're looking at the quantitative sometimes is helpful because there might be a standard, and let's just say that your product meets 70% of the standards. Well, do you know if that district or that state mandate is that it has to be at least 50%? So you're good. Does it have to be 75%? You've got a gap that you need to address. Like, what's the actual story going on? And that data is also, it is just one piece, but so important. And then when you think about how you use that, a BI plan, a go-to-market plan, a sales lead plan to kind of score leads and things like that. Well, if you're meeting the standards and you've got other factors that are a positive, then that lead might bubble to the top. And so I think not only knowing where you sit with the standards as an important piece, but also the other factors that say, where could we find the most success? Where do we have a gap that we need to address before we go after that lead? You don't want to waste an opportunity or a contact if you're going to end up with we really like you, but sorry, you missed that important thing.
Yeah. I know there's a number of states now that are requiring third-party reviews to ensure, adoption of their standards, which it's an extra step for companies. And I get that. I mean, it ensures that alignment, which is really good, and that's valuable. It's unfortunate that there's that added cost for the ed tech companies, but I guess if you win contracts, then you'll be smiling at the end of the day. But from my discussions with other industry leaders, it seems to me that a few states, without naming the states, have gotten a little bit over their skis in terms of such rapid changes that they are having a real hard time to manage the process, right? Because they're starting to go a little too quick. Cycles are coming up, deadlines are coming up. They're not quite ready to make assessments and to enforce what's going on. Do you see kind of the same thing happening?
Yeah, certainly. Again, I keep mentioning we talk to a lot of districts, and I was talking to another curriculum director the other day, and we were chatting about the fact that her state had that list of acceptable materials, and it took forever. They promised it, it's coming, it's coming. They finally produced, the state produced their sort of approved materials list. And then there was some backlash, because then when it got into the hands of down to the district level and the school and the classroom level, there was some, unhappiness with the selection. And then there was a backpedaling, which was to say, well, this is not the only list, but if you want to use a different material or technology or whatever it is, you need to prove to us A, B, and C to have us say it's acceptable. And so knowing what's really going on, and knowing that, if you didn't know that, you might say, well, we're not on that list and it's too hard to get on it and we can't even do it. But if you know that there's a back door, and if you build those champions at the influential level, and then you can say, well, if we prove this, this, and this, then, you can put our name forward, then there's a way to get on that list. And then once you're on that list, and you can go to other districts and say, we got on that list, then there's a path in. So I think that nuance of what's going on in the market, and it is evolving like monthly, daily, maybe, it's always changing with different legislation and different rules and things that are getting put out at the state level.
So let's, I want to get some closing thoughts. And so if you had to pick one or two things that you think, all right, well, we've talked about a lot, and if people weren't listening, or if they wanted a summary, what are the two things that they need to do to win and check a few of the boxes, Maria, from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess I would say, first of all, repeat after me, which is, it's not that I can't afford research for my company, it's that I can't afford not to do research. And I'd like to acknowledge that research can be expensive, it can take a long time, but it doesn't have to be some big daunting thing. So just starting to say, how can we incorporate qualitative or quantitative research in any form into the way that we do business? Like, you must start doing that. There's a lot of customer feedback you could be gathering. There's a lot of internal information that you could be gathering. Your customers who are fans, you can be gathering. And the other thing is, really keeping an eye on the market. And as we've been talking about, you need help to do that. And who can you turn to that's a trusted source to say, what are the essential things to focus on? There's a lot of noise out there. And how can I just start monitoring the market movement, and then monitoring through research what's going on with my own product and our opportunities? And so it's like, research first. And research, when I say that, includes what EdGate provides. It is data and information that informs decisions and provides actionable insights. What can you do to make that part of your mandate for your business and how you operate? So starting with, everybody can do something, where do you begin? And using that information to make more informed decisions.
Fantastic. And Maria, if people wanted to get hold of you, would it be okay to include your information in the notes below? And
yeah, absolutely.
You want to kind of give people a little heads up how what the best way to contact you is?
Yeah, absolutely. MMSeducation.com is our website. We're on all the socials as well. You can reach out to me directly, Slabaugh@mmseducation.com. One of my absolute favorite things is to talk to companies and take on those really challenging but really exciting opportunities. I love nothing more than the problem that no one else thinks that they can figure out, because I know with MMS we enjoy that collaboration and teasing out from stakeholders what are the real potential for any business to make to be successful in the K through 12 space. So happy to talk to anyone about what's going on and how research can be a part of that success.
Well, thank you. And, EdGate would like to acknowledge MMS Education and Maria Slabaugh. We appreciate your partnership. You're one of the quality partners that we have. Over the last 26 years we've been operating. I know you guys have been in business for a long time as well. And as you said at the beginning of the podcast, you've been in the research space for your entire career. So this is not something that you're coming into fresh. You have a deep background, and we really appreciate your insights today.
Great, thank you. And same with EdGate. We've enjoyed our partnership, and also just really appreciate this opportunity to talk about research. I could talk about it for all day long because it is a very dynamic and exciting space, but we appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Well, on that note, April 4th will be the upcoming webinar. Maria will be there, myself, Connie from Clarity Consulting, and Gina Falk, the general manager of EdGate. We'll all be on the podcast. We'll be talking about how to make the cut in K-12 in 2024-2025. Please join us. Information below. And thank you, Maria. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rich.